RPN, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.
This episode of Mission Log is sponsored by Mint Mobile. Cut your wireless bill to as little as $15 a month at mintmobile.com/missionlog.
This episode is also brought to you by ExpressVPN. Take back your internet privacy today and find out how you can get 3 months free at expressvpn.com/missionlog.
Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast, episode 362, Looking for Parmark in All the Wrong Places.
Welcome to another episode of Mission Log, a Roddenberry Star Trek podcast. I'm Norman Lau.
And I'm John Champion. Each week on Mission Log, we take a look at each and every episode of Star Trek and try to discover the morals, meanings hidden within, the sometimes not so subtle innuendos that lie within.
This week, looking for Parmark in all the wrong places. Looking for Parmark in too many deep spaces, searching their... forget it, you get the drift. If you're looking for how to contact us, please set your subspace frequencies to these following subspace channels. Mission Log relies on your participation, so that's why we want to hear from you. Help us spread the word by giving us a like or a share on Facebook or Twitter, where you'll find us at Mission Log Pod. Tell others about us there, and if you're inclined to leave us a review at Apple Podcasts, we'll be grateful, and we'll share those in a future supplemental. You can reach us on Skype at Mission Log Pod, or by calling 323-522-5641. Our email address is missionlog@roddenberry.com. And remember, we may use your comments on an upcoming episode of Mission Log. And now, without further ado, here is John Champion with the trivia for Looking for Parmark in All the Wrong Places.
Hey, look, I'll sing it. Don't tempt me. I will. We'll turn this whole thing into karaoke right now. All right, trivia for today's episode. Well, it was written by Ronald D. Moore, and here Ron gets the credit for both the story and the teleplay. It was really his baby, but the heart of it, doing a riff on Cyrano de Bergerac, was Michael Dorn's idea. It's a simple kind of a throwaway idea that sticks the more that people talk about it. So eventually Ron took it and ran with it. The pretense served a few purposes, but primarily it was the appeal of fleshing out the Dax and Worf relationship that he felt was most intriguing. And I did mention Cyrano de Bergerac, of course, so if you haven't read the original 1897 play or seen it performed in a high school or theater near you, or seen the movie, I recommend the one with Jose Ferrer. Do check those out. Now, the episode is directed by Andrew Robinson. Look at that, Garak himself. We've talked about the Star Trek directing school before, that sort of informal ritual of learning that many actors have gone through starting with TNG. Andrew has a theater background, and he just happened to have received awards for 2 shows that he directed in LA. The production staff were well aware, and he put his hat into the ring. And here we are with Andrew's debut as a TV director. While this is his only DS9 outing, he will later direct 2 episodes of Voyager. All right, about that Batleth fight. Now, this is pretty much all Armin Shimmerman doing his own stunt work. He worked with Dan Curry to understand the basics and how to make it look right. Then he took home a Batleth prop, and he studied with the weapon for 10 days to get the moves down. And on top of that, he worked with a mime to nail the bits at the end where Quark isn't in control of his own actions. The prop that they used as a sort of motor control puppeteering device between Quark and Worf was designed by John Eaves, and it was purposely left incredibly vague so the audience wasn't bogged down with technical details. Science advisor Andrei Bormanis did say, though, that you can kind of think of it like a CG motion capture device. It is very commonplace now in special effects, not as much back then. Now, about the set where they have that fight, it was the same one that they built for Apocalypse Rising. They just let it sit They emptied out all the statues and took out that kind of riser platform, and they got to reuse it here on this relatively lower budgeted episode. So good recycling of sets there. Now let's talk about guest stars. Well, it's very nice to welcome back 3 Trek guest stars. We have the great Joseph Ruskin again as Tumek, who we saw in the House of Quark. Of course, Joseph is a veteran Trek guest star going back to his turn in The Gamesters of Triskelion as Galt. Thank goodness we're not done with him yet, because he will be back in both Voyager and Enterprise as different characters. As Grilka, we welcome back Mary Kay Adams, mostly known for her work in soap operas. And Norman, for you, let's not forget Babylon 5. Mm-hmm. And this is Mary Kay's second and final appearance in Star Trek. Finally, Grilka's bodyguard, Thopak, is played by Phil Morris. Think back, way back to the first season TOS episode Miri, and there you can spot a little Phil Morris. Fast forward to Star Trek 3, and there he is, all grown up as a cadet in a Starfleet uniform. The name should already be familiar to you, though. We pointed out before that Phil's dad is the late Greg Morris, who was one of the stars of Mission Impossible, hence why Phil was an easy casting choice to make when shooting the original Star Trek. And then, of course, I love it that Phil went on to play Grant Collier, Barney's son, in the 1980s version of Mission Impossible. We'll see him one more time on DS9, then again on Voyager.
Love is in the air. Don't worry, it's still mainly oxygen and nitrogen, but trust me on this one.
Prologue. Evening time, and Dr. Bashir is doing that totally cool and normal thing, which is stopping outside the door to the O'Brien's quarters in order to eavesdrop. Quark happens by and lends an ear. Is an argument between Miles and Kira, since Miles hit her spring ball racket. He's just looking out for her, and his and Keiko's baby, which leads us to Keiko, who just happens to be walking down the corridor at that moment, entering her quarters to break up the fight, which puts an end to Quark and Bashir's entertainment. In the Replimat, Jadzia and Worf are discussing the finer points of Klingon opera when they spot a group of Klingons coming in through an airlock. It's 2 men and a woman, and when Worf gets a look at her, he's rather taken. She's glorious, to which Dax answers, well, she's all right. They follow her into Quark's, where they see a reunion between the Klingon woman and Quark, an extremely familiar one at that. This jogs Dax's memory to point out to Worf that the woman is Grilka, Quark's ex-wife. Act 1. Quark is schmoozing at his best when he learns Grilka's family has run into some financial problems. He says he'll take a look at the books to see if he can make things right. And he better. Grilka is traveling with 2 male Klingons, an advisor named Tumek, and a guard named Thopak. It's the latter who threatens Quark with his life if he doesn't get it just right. This all gives Dax time to catch Worf up on Season 3 of Deep Space Nine, namely The House of Quark, in which Quark found himself accidentally becoming Grilka's husband by claiming he killed her husband. Long story short, he helped her, she helped him, they divorced, all good. So for Worf, you're saying there's still a chance. Dr. Bashir has been working on a way to suppress some of Kira's sneezes. When Chief O'Brien stops by to pick up the device at the infirmary, the two talk a bit about Kira's various side effects from the pregnancy. The chief says he's concerned about a rash he saw on the Major's thighs when he was helping her out of the tub, which leads Bashir to some ribbing about just how close Miles and Kira have become. With Worf's interest piqued, he shows up at Quark's bar later to make a show in front of Grilka. There's the tough guy Klingon posturing, insulting her companion, Thopak. It's all a little awkward until Tumek steps in and says, "Let me have a little word with you, Worf. This kind of thing doesn't fly since you, of all people, are seen as a traitor. Best to leave us alone, and the lady would like you to leave." So he does. Act 2. Worf is licking his wounds, Dax is there to lend a supportive ear, in walks Quark, who needs a little advice of his own. He's been invited to a private dinner with Grilka, and he's not sure what to do. Dax tries to give him some pointers while Worf listens in. Then, really telling himself, he chimes in about the custom of bringing the leg of a freshly killed Lingta to declare his intentions. Either that will work, or Grilka's bodyguard will shatter every bone in his body. Good enough for Quark, and maybe Worf is getting an idea here too. At Chez O'Brien, Miles is giving Kira a massage to ease her pregnancy soreness. Keiko even comes in with Kira's freshly altered uniform from Garrick's. Miles and Kira talk a little about the pleasures of home and how Miles misses Ireland, a place Kira says she'd enjoy spending some time with the Chief. With the awkwardness level now at maximum, we cut to the Defiant, where Worf is escaping by listening to Klingon opera. Quark comes in the day after his date with Grilka. It went okay, but not perfectly. She says he has the heart of a poet. They ate the Lingta, they listened to music, all under the threatening watch of her bodyguard. Quark knows he's on the right path, but he knows he needs to help. Quark knows he's on the right path, but he knows he needs help to unlock her heart. Worf says he'll help. Act 3. Like many Klingon rituals, this one will include fighting, so it's off to the holosuite, where Quark is getting some bat-left tips from Dax and Worf. He's struggling, he's trying to get the ritual words right too, but at least he looks pretty cool in the white fur Klingon battle garb. Dax and Worf do their best to encourage him. It is, after all, the ritual that brought together Kahless and Lucara. In the security office, Odo and Kira are going through security reports when he blames O'Brien's lack of attention on a recent rash of thefts. Kira's defense of him raises Odo's suspicion that she's maybe getting a little too personal with him. She's referring to him as Miles rather than the Chief. She does explain that she's living with the O'Briens right now and carrying their child. Of course they're close. Odo wants to know how close. But we'll shelve this awkward discussion so we can get back to work. Our Klingon friends are getting antsy. Thopak is really worked up about Quark's advances on Grilka, but Tumek is trying to play it cool. Quark is doing his best, though, when he and Grilka return from a holosuite battle. He lays it all out on the table. She may be Klingon, but to his Ferengi heart, she may be worth more than all the latinum in the quadrant. Well, if her Klingon heart doesn't just melt, which prompts Thopak to flip the table right in front of them all. He will not protect a house that lets in a Ferengi, so the guard challenges Quark to a fight to the death. Act 4. Before the bloodshed, we check in with Miles and Keiko, who are having a romantic glass of champagne, celebrating that the Chief is managed, well, probably begged, to be off work early every day so he can spend time with his wife. In walks Kira, though. She's stressed, and Keiko suggests that Miles give her a massage. No, he's not up to it. And she really doesn't want one. In fact, she's just there to let them know that she's leaving first thing tomorrow to go to a quiet retreat on Bajor for a few days. Keiko is insistent that Miles go with her, regardless of their objections, so he can watch after her and their unborn child. With it settled, Miles has to go pack his bag. Now on to the Klingon problem. Quark doesn't have a lot of options that don't end in his death or his dishonor, which means losing Grilka forever. But then, struck with inspiration, Dax has an idea. Which leads us to another sparring session in which she and Quark are going at it with their batless. This time, Quark is really good, though. And then we see why. Worf and Quark are using some sort of neural link to let Worf essentially act as puppeteer for Quark's actions. It works. Quark is good but exhausted and ready for the fight tomorrow. Worf confides in Dax, though, that he still doesn't get what Grilka sees in Quark, and he can't believe he's helping him. He's the one who should be with Grilka. Dax says maybe he's missing something, like someone who's a better match for him, like someone who's more attainable and more fun. Hint, hint, hint. The moment for the fight has arrived. Quark enters a holosuite simulation of the Great Hall, while Worf directs, hidden away in another suite. As expected, it's a pretty tough fight, and Quark is definitely looking good with the Batleth, much to the surprise of Thopak and everyone else, until something goes wrong with the optronic relay linking him to Worf. Act 5. Dax and Worf are hard at work teching the tech, while Quark has to think quickly on his feet. He resorts to an old tradition that he just made up, which is basically making speech so full of terrible metaphor that it definitely confuses and annoys the Klingons. It works just long enough for Dax to get the tech back online, which means Worf is ready to go and the fight commences. This time it's quick. Worf gets the upper hand and knocks Thopak to the ground. Worf doesn't kill him, though. Rather, Quark picks up the felled weapon and hands it to Grilka. Grilka then kicks Thopak out of her employ, which leaves her and Quark to their own devices. So now, with the neural link deactivated by Dax, it seems Grilka and Quark are getting reacquainted in a more intimate way. Dax, not missing a beat, calls for the holosuite she's in with Worf to provide her with a Batleth of her own. Their fight, which by now we understand as Klingon foreplay, is short but sincere, and Dax gets the upper hand by knocking Worf on his back. Weapons aside, it's still physical, but the camera does indeed cut away before we see what else they're up to. There's Miles and Kira now, ready to depart for Bajor. Kira informs Miles that their destination is a romantic house with a river view far away from the nearest town. Sounds awful. So awful that Miles says he will not go. He'll just tell Keiko that she left without him. In fact, Kira says she'll go to the capital and hang out with Shakar. The two take a pause, hug, and see each other for what might have been in another life, as Kira puts it. Just when it looks like something else might happen, get out, she tells the chief. So as long as all is well that's ending well, we'll catch up with Quark, who is getting examined for the multiple sprains, breaks, bruises, and other stresses put on his body by some very physical exertion with Grilka. Similarly, in walk Worf and Dax, who have some physical damage of their own. While waiting to see the doctor, they discuss the Klingon tradition that says they must get married. Dax says neither of them are very traditional, though. So instead of trying to answer exactly what they have to do next, how about they just take it one day at a time? The end.
Nicely done, John. Nicely done.
Thank you.
I have to ask you, though, I mean, during the entirety of this episode when you were watching it, and knowing that Andrew Robinson directed it, I have to say, he must have been a huge fan of kind of like the pantheon of John Hughes movies, because let me tell you, there are so many examples of kind of like the high school teenage angst rom-com type of stuff that's going on here. I mean, you know, there's just so much unrequited this. And,
okay, or is it that John Hughes was such a fan of the classic romantic comedies?
It's all coming to bear
it's
on
all,
this episode.
You know, it goes to show there are no news stories. You know, we're always pulling pieces of the classics and reformatting, recasting, reconfiguring, and this is where you end up. But
you almost kind of want to see the scene where, you know, Quark's like, does she like me or does she like me? You know, I got this note. Dax, can you pass her this note? Why do I got to pass her the note? Because you know her and she knows you, and you know I just want to tell her that I don't just like her, I like her, and I mowed all these lawns, to make all this money so that I can buy her that jacket.
There's a deep cut. That's good. That's good. Nice. Oh yeah, all the romantic stories rolled into one here. Which we start off with Bashir eavesdropping on his friend. That's wrong, 100%, and yet people do it, even or maybe especially to their friends. Not saying that's right, but it happens, and boy, how do we get started with that? Yeah,
it's kind of funny that we're coming off of when Quark and Bashir were both busted together for like smuggling in those gems, and now they're kind of like working together to see what's going on, to get the eavesdrop on the O'Brien's quarters, just to see what's going on. Gossip is just rampant on DS9 this episode.
It really is. It truly is. Yeah. I'm glad to see that they're sort of spelling out in DS9, which has been a mission log conversation about Worf for a very long time. And here you have Dax calling out Worf's adoption of Klingon tradition when he definitely is not a traditional Klingon. It takes her and it takes Tumek to say, look, you're raised by humans. You're wearing a Starfleet uniform. You're, the traitor to him maybe is not the worst of it. And to Dax's point, his adherence to these traditions have not always made things better in his life. He needs to sort of really figure out and embrace who he is.
Is it me, or was Dax, as soon as Grilka walked onto the promenade, was she just kind of playing like the wounded kind of pseudo wannabe girlfriend the entire time? Like, oh, she's okay, she's all right, like whatevs.
Yes. Which, I mean, is interesting. They were dropping these. I don't even know if it was necessarily the writers specifically dropping hints, but there is a chemistry between Dax and Worf that we've seen just little pieces of their bond, particularly because of her interest in Klingon tradition and her experiences with Klingon tradition. I almost think back, there's this letter that we shared with Will Wheaton where Patrick Stewart says to Gene Roddenberry, going in before the end of season 1, he's like, hey, are we doing a thing here with Picard and Dr. Crusher? Because we play it like that. So are you really doing that? Like, is this a thing we'll actually explore? And I wonder if this is one of those things where it's just a good choice by an actor. And the more of those that happen, you got a couple of good lines of dialogue, you got a good director, and you get some good, strong choices by actors. Then those same writers watch it weeks later and they're like, oh, we could do something with this,
Are you alluding to that scene? I think it was in The Naked Time, or The Naked Now?
The Naked Now. Yeah.
Where he kind of settles up to Beverly. He's like, right.
I'm like,
right. What?
He does a little wave goodbye. Yeah.
Like, okay.
It's fun stuff, but they would keep dropping these just little hints. And look, and I get it, as a writer, you can't. It's sort of the Lois and Clark problem. Like, as soon as you cement that relationship, the show's over.
Mulder and Scully. Yeah, you can't have them.
Yeah.
Get together. Sure.
I feel like Star Trek might be a little bit different just because you've got a sort of a bigger space to play in. But, those relationships still come with their own issues here. Yeah. We're going to be making song references throughout. I love that Quark quotes Edwin Starr.
Oh, I was so smiling, right?
What is he good for? You ask me. Absolutely nothing.
And let's look at body parts. So we were talking about body parts and kind of like Quark kind of growing from that moment, and he did say that. And I know that he's trying to play up to Grilka, but the before the reformation of Quark's sensibilities, he would have been like, well, Rules of Acquisition 34 says war is good for business. He kind of like didn't default to that, right? He defaulted to like, what's war good for? Absolutely nothing.
Norman, what is Rule of Acquisition number 35?
Let's see. Wait. The rule of action 34 is war is good for business. Rule of action 35 is peace is good for business.
There you go.
I did read those. I read those. Just in case those people, those sharp-eared people out there were listening.
Yes. Those Ferengi. Yeah. It's funny, back to your point, there's that conversation between Miles and Bashir, and Bashir says, well, where it gets around, it's a small station, and Miles says, it's a huge station. First of all, I mean, that bit is funny. It's just funny already because, yes, that station is huge, and depending on when you join the show, there's either 300 people on board or 2,000 people on board. Even if there's 2,000 people on board, it's still a huge station, but nothing travels faster than gossip.
Yeah, it's kind of like they were dealing with like the small town community type of dynamic, right? You know,
it's inevitable. Yeah. There is there's some stuff here with Bashir though.
Cringy.
Did you look? I'm sorry, it's not a funny bit. It's creepy. And here's the thing: I watch that scene, and you could literally just pull that line of dialogue out and the reaction to it, pull that out, and the scene will still work fine. Because you can still get across with some slightly different choices by the actors there. You can still get across the idea that Bashir would sincerely, in this case, question his friend like, sounds like you're quite a bit more intimate with Kira than you were before. You know, you can get across that idea without it just being creepy as hell, as it is here. I'm sorry, that was not cool.
It all seemed like he was kind of being like the jealous type, like, you know, Kira's starting to kind of Yoko Ono up on him. You know?
Yeah,
like, you're going to get... First of all, Keiko's back, which is already kind of like stealing your time away from me. And now you have Kira, and you're kind of digging her.
Yeah.
So what's going on there? Oh, by the way, did you like, you know, creep up on her and kind of take a look at her when you were checking out her rash? Obviously, you did look if you saw the rash.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I think it was like one of those kind of like, I hate to say it, but like one of those like locker room moments where it's like, so what's going on there?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it seemed a lot out of place for somebody like you know, the doctor, you know,
because you can say, hey, what's going on there? Hey, talk to you. I'm your pal, Bashir. I'm your pal, Julian. Let's talk. What's going on here? Without resorting to that. Did you look? I mean, come on. Stop being
like
so
said,
adolescent.
Man,
you know,
this is a high school rom-com.
Yeah.
And that's something that, you know, one of the jocks would have said. Is like, so, dude, what'd you see in the showers, man, when you got in there?
But in the rom-com, that guy is a jerk. We don't want that guy around.
No, we don't want that guy. Yeah.
Yeah. We have to point out poor Morn just being used as a prop by Worf. In that scene. Like, it's funny to hear Worf apologize ahead of time, but he does just throw throw Morn rather onto the floor. Also, there was a really funny bit to me. Did you notice in that shot, right when Worf sits down in Morn's chair, if you look in the background, there's Tumek sitting at that table, and with the graphic behind him, it looks like the Klingon has bunny ears on. It's hilarious. It's just so obvious. If you go back and freeze frame, you're like, wow, they put bunny ears on Tumek.
You know what's funny is that when they were focusing on Morn in that scene, when they're kind of like the camera was like drifting to him, not only was he finishing his drink, but he was like using his finger to spoon out that drink. He was really enjoying himself.
Yes,
he's like he was minding his own business as Morn does.
Yeah,
and he's
right.
Like, oh man,
right.
I'm gonna enjoy this drink. I'm gonna, you know, whatever's at the bottom of this thing, I'm gonna scoop out with my finger, and then I'm on the floor.
Yeah,
what's up with that?
Not fair at all. Yeah, not cool. Oh, and what was the line? So I meant no disrespect. You showed none, which was interesting. So that was Worf to Tumek after he has threatened Thopak. I meant no disrespect, and Tumek says you showed none, which was a funny line because Worf literally just disrespected Thopak. But interesting though that in the context of this being part of the Klingon mating ritual, it's like, oh, that part's okay. What's not okay is that you're a traitor. But the other part, we're cool with.
You know, I didn't know until you brought it up in the trivia that was Galt. I was like, what? Not Thopak.
Yeah.
The other, you know.
Tumek. Yeah.
Tumek. Yeah. I was like, because I was like, I know this guy's face.
Yeah.
And now, when you in the trivia, I was like, oh, of course.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, I've always said that, Odo has always been really good at studying the human condition, and probably even more so now since he's humanized or turned into a humanoid. But his instincts are still there. And, okay, so, when we're talking about Bashir, and Bashir is kind of like showing his jealous side, Odo's kind of showing his jealous side too. Right?
Right.
Because he's like, before you used to call him, the chief. But now you're calling him Miles. There's this intimacy that happens when you start using their proper name. It's like if Miles started calling her Nerys, which he didn't, because that would have been a step above their relationship. But he's, Odo's has his eye on like her behavior and almost kind of like how she was acting when Shakar came on the station.
Oh yeah,
yeah.
I'm surprised we didn't throw Odo completely into the mix again with his romantic plot line as well. But yeah, he's aware of these things. Yeah. And what is it? Tumek asks Quark, "Have you ever pursued a Klingon woman?" No. Except for Kalar. Come on, Worf. She was awesome. Kalar was awesome. Please, just for God's sake, don't ask him about his son either.
Yes.
The
extension of Worf's ignoring his prior family. I do remember that scene where like Worf was singing Klingon opera to her, and then she turns and is like, he goes, "I don't want to hear any of that Klingon nonsense." As Susie Plaxton does.
Yeah.
So yeah, I forgot. Well, no, I didn't forget. Worf forgot.
Yeah, Worf forgot. You remembered. Norman remembered.
A very significant
Worf forgot.
Klingon woman in his past.
Yeah.
So what I love about kind of like the Keiko, Kira, Miles dynamic is Keiko's kind of like going around with her life and as business as usual, and Keiko's just living with them, and they're making sure that their baby is okay. But the whole thing about Ireland, and when he was giving her the massage, and he was thinking of kind of like the fondness of home, and it's like, I wish you could have been there with me, and he was drifting into something, and I think what he was drifting into was actual real feelings that I think they were starting to to at least share or explore. Totally.
Yeah. In this episode we learned that Worf has size 18 boots, and you know what they say about a guy with big shoes?
He's got a big batleth.
Yeah, he's got a big batleth. Yeah. I was going to go with big feet. I was going to go with big feet, but big batleth. That is the other correct answer.
Yeah. What? One of the things that I found really, really endearing about Terry as Dax is that she has this just devilish look at times that she's just mastered. And when she shoots that look, kind of like either at someone in the cast or in the story, or kind of like breaking the fourth wall, and you know what's going on inside that mind of hers. And maybe it's Curzon's mind as well, right? But yeah, when she says that she has an idea, watch out. You don't know what's going to happen. I also thought that after kind of like the training scene with Dax and Worf, she was a little bit more forward than I think I've ever seen her, like in the course of their relationship, starting all the way back when she first saw him in Way of the Warrior.
Sure.
And maybe it's because she's also swept in this whole Parmak situation where, she sees Worf, pursuing Grilka. She sees Quark pursuing Grilka. What about her? Like, where am I in all this? Where are my feelings? And I'm kind of getting kind of like shoved to the side. I'm being kind of like Quark's confidant, and at the same time I'm being Worf's confidant. But who's my confidant? What about me?
Right.
What about my feelings?
Right. Good for her.
Yeah.
It's one of those things that sort of comes with the wisdom of age. It's like if you've been around long enough, you can just finally boom, here's my feelings. I'm done. Yeah,
but I think that some of the Jadzia was really kind of like rising to the surface in that situation. Well, speaking of that, the training sequence, what did you think about Quark, not only in that sequence, but kind of putting on the Warriors gear? He's so cute when he puts on Warrior gear. I'm sorry. That's the only way I can describe it.
It's great. I want to see that at a convention. I want to see a little Ferengi in Klingon Warrior garb.
That would be the best cosplay ever.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Winner of many strips of gold press latinum.
Yes.
So when Worf does his Cyrano de Bergerac shtick, isn't that kind of dishonorable for a Klingon to do what he did with Quark during this kind of like this fight for Grilka's honor? Because you would think that Worf would be like, nope, you got to fight him straight up. That's the warrior's way. If you die, you die. That's the way of the code. That's the way of the Klingon. He's like, no, I think I'm going to find a way to win a victory for me and win a victory for you.
That's Cyrano, though. I mean, Cyrano would rather have had Roxanne, but he helps Christiane instead. So the motivation there is interesting to figure out, but we're also seeing Worf sort of get dismantled by Dax about what his values are and where he really stands, and particularly in that scene with Tumak. He's saying, like, look, you're not one of us. You can keep saying it, but you're not.
And one of the last things I wanted to bring up, at the scene with the Chief and Kira at the end in the shuttle pod, so they admit in a way that there are feelings there. In a way, in a manner of speaking, because they are literally trying to find ways not to admit that there is something there. And when Kira says, in another life, that usually means that, well, I have these feelings. I can't act on them. If it was something different, then I would, but I can't, but they're there. That's how the algebra works for me, right?
Yeah.
How do you see that?
Oh, I see it, and I 100% agree, and I think that is a very human and very understandable thing. Yeah, I thought they played it just right, and honestly, you have to have Kira be the one to say, get out. She's got to be the one who draws the line, but it's still, as hard as that might have been to do, it is absolutely the right thing to do. Hey, and just to leave it on a light note, that laugh at the end when Bashir asks Quark what he's been up to, and Armin's just uproarious, wonderful laugh kills me every time.
Remember those candy hearts from Valentine's Day? Call it a hunch, but the Klingons probably have much more violent candy heart phrases than anyone else.
We'll continue with looking for Parmak in all the wrong places in a moment, but we'd like to take a moment to tell you about this week's sponsors.
Hey, first up, Norman, Mint Mobile. You and I talk all the time about how our primary way of communicating with people these days is our phones. I mean, literally all day, every day, that's probably the first device that I go to because, well, I'm working from home a lot more. I need to stay in touch. So my phone has become this necessary device, even more so than it was before. But with that necessity, not only does it have to be a great handset, there also has to be a great service behind it. And I think about all those years, literally decades, that I was with one of the big major wireless providers and how much money that cost me month to month, because I just completely accepted the idea that my service had to be $100 a month easily. And there was no way to get out of that or to get around it. Well, I was very glad to find that Mint Mobile cut that cost down to a fraction of that original $100. In fact, you can cut your wireless bill down to $15 a month, which saves you hundreds of dollars by switching over to Mint Mobile. So with anybody within the sound of my voice who is looking to save without sacrificing service, switching to Mint Mobile is a no-brainer. I mean, look at all the benefits. You keep your phone. You keep your phone number. You get fast 4G LTE service. You get unlimited text, unlimited calls, and you get 100% money-back guarantee if you're not satisfied. That's within 7 days of receiving your order. So for somebody like me, Norman, and I know like you, who the phone is important, and why not save some money on that service? Mint Mobile just makes sense.
Well, absolutely, John. I mean, there are things that people love, and I think it's pretty universal. We love saving money. We love making our money stretch and go further. And as a new customer to Mint Mobile and as a user, I know that every time I see my bill, I'm like, wow, what a difference. So to get your wireless plan for just $15 a month, And to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/missionlog. That's mintmobile.com/missionlog. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/missionlog.
Hey, and while we're talking about working from home, well, we want to thank our other sponsor, which would be ExpressVPN. You know, I do everything from home now, Norman, and that means work. It means my personal work, like banking and paying bills. Everything that I have to be on top of, I'm doing from my computer. And the more that I learn about how that works, the more I'm kind of terrified about what I did in the past. Because going online and logging into a bank, logging into a service where I have to pay something or put in sensitive information, I always figured that using incognito mode was all that I needed to do. And what I've learned by using ExpressVPN and studying a little more about it, incognito mode does not hide your activity. In fact, it doesn't matter what mode you use or how many times you clear your browsing history. That might be on your computer, just sitting there on your desk, but your ISP can still see every website you visited. And that's why I'm at home, or no matter where I am, I do not go online, particularly doing anything sensitive, without using ExpressVPN. So it doesn't matter who you get your internet service from. When I lived in one place, I had Comcast. I live here, and I use Spectrum. ISPs in the United States can legally sell your information to ad companies. I don't want that, but ExpressVPN steps into the picture. So ExpressVPN reroutes that connection through their secure servers, so your ISP can't see what sites you visit. And even better, they're keeping that information secure by encrypting it.
What I love about using ExpressVPN, John, is that it's so easy to use. The app shows you exactly how you need to stay connected, how to stay connected when you think that you're not even connected, which is like never, because I never have a problem with ExpressVPN. And sometimes I just go on the app to say like, oh, I'm still connected? Great, because now I can just use my device as I usually do. I'm on my phone all the time. So if security is a big deal for you and making sure that your privacy is also protected, make sure that you protect your online activity today with the VPN rated #1 by CNET and Wired. Visit our exclusive link, expressvpn.com/missionlog. That's expressvpn.com/missionlog to learn more.
So, Norman, I feel like kind of the way to look at this episode, looking for Parmach in all the wrong places, so tempted to sing, is that we sort of have to look at it per relationship and the dynamics of each one, because there are different things at stake. There are different aspects explored right off the bat. And I sort of put them in an order that made sense to me, which was sort of from least to most interesting, or maybe not even interesting as a word, but more real, more resonant emotionally. The Quark and Grilka plotline, of course, that is just ripped right out of Cyrano, and of course we've got Worf in the Cyrano character there, and Quark is Christian, and that would make Grilka Roxanne here. But It seems a little by the numbers. It is done well, but really for Quark, okay, he gets to express himself a bit. For Grilka, she's sort of, we know that she's getting one thing out of this, which is the financial help that she needs from at least having a maybe not good, but very crafty businessman check out the family books and try to regain her name. So there are different motivations there. Quark's infatuation is fun to watch. I mean, there's no two ways around that. But I don't know if there's sort of a deeper thing to be found there. You basically have to end the episode where you end up, which is Quark gets to be the hero for the day. Grilka is clearly having fun. And you have that hilarious moment at the end in the infirmary where they have just worn each other out, or at least she's worn him out. That's really all that comes down to.
Well, I mean, I think essentially this episode, for all of the fun that we've kind of poked at it being, somewhat of channeling the John Hughes type of, romantic high schoolish, college-ish comedies of the 1980s. I mean, it's a lighthearted episode.
Oh,
and
sure.
I think that, it has to be in there. And I think it actually hit the right time because, since Broken Link and then since, Apocalypse Rising and The Ship, you have a lot of heavy episodes and a lot going on, especially with, what we covered with The Ship in our previous episode. There's a lot that we discussed at a very, very serious level.
Right.
And I think that this is one of those perfect opportunities just to release the tension. Well, I guess it depends on what tension we're talking about, because there's a lot of sexual tension in this episode.
Sure.
But
yeah.
You're allowing characters to just kind of breathe a little bit and to let their hair down, literally at the end for our couples. Right. But just to see them in a more relaxed environment, to stay in tune with them, and just to give everyone a moment to catch their breath, to catch up. I mean, even Sisko, Avery, was only in there for that one line.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. And I think that removing him from the equation just kind of removes a lot of that heaviness, from a standard episode where, Captain Sisko would be like, it's something of a dramatic turn usually when it's Captain Sisko at the center of the episode.
It's funny. I thought for a moment that this was one that he directed because he's in it so little. I was very pleased to see that Andrew Robinson directed, and I was like, oh, okay, yes, that sort of light, deft, theatrical hand. Yes, now I get it that seems like Andrew Robinson, but there was so little Sisko, I was like, oh, okay, well, maybe he's off screen for a reason here.
I also think that there was a really nice chemistry with the cast that's starting to develop for me. I think that when Worf came in with Way of the Warrior, I don't want to speak for the fans out there that know the chemistry of his insertion intimately when that happened. But for me, everyone in this episode seemed to click so organically and genuinely. I felt that Terry and Michael just had a new rapport, and they know how their characters work together, the timing involved, and the glances that they shoot at each other, and how they all, even Michael and Armin, I think they actually have just a better working dynamic and speed. And even though this isn't a serious episode or an episode that necessarily adds to the lore, I do think it goes a long way of just filling in those quieter character moments that glue those characters together in these offbeat type of stories. And I found it really nice to watch.
Let's talk about that Dax and Worf plot line then next, because this is, well, I'm going to say that for everybody, there's at least one side of this that everybody can relate to. You like someone, they like someone else, you're sort of waving your arms over your head saying, what about me? What about me? Not that I've ever been there. Not that I'm saying that I can relate to that at all. Or maybe you're just on the other side, which could be just as bad. That you're sort of that dense about what's going on right in front of you. So I thought that even with sort of the broad comedy that played, like you're saying here, there is sort of a genuine chemistry. There's a genuine relationship that we're seeing there between the actors, just playing the roles, that breathes life into what would otherwise sort of be very much by rote, Mm-hmm. So I thought, sort of giving them props for saying, like, yeah, we've got this farce that we've decided to build into this episode. Like you said, to give us some breathing room, fill in some of those gaps, but at least try to find the realness within that lighthearted episode. What I really want to talk about is Miles and Kira.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think this is a very meaty topic, and honestly, it could have been taken much more seriously depending on what kind of episode they decided to write. There's something that happens to people when they, and not everybody, but there is something that can happen with people when they work with each other or they're in very close proximity, particularly under stressful or very emotional circumstances. And what's interesting is that we tend to confuse that intimacy sometimes with attraction. And sometimes that works itself out because clearer heads might prevail. You kind of get what's going on. And sometimes it doesn't work itself out. So then those relationships get formed, and sometimes those relationships even work out, or they explode horrifically. And it's interesting that on set, it's kind of a cliche. You hear about people who work together in a show. I mean, here we've got Bashir and Kira. We've got Nana and Sid working together for a few years, and a real relationship formed there, partly because proximity, and you're in this high-stress situation, and as actors, part of your job is to be present and open oneself up emotionally in these scenes. I thought that Miles and Kira plotline, because of all of that, there was a sincerity there, even though they kept playing it for comedy. Now, I'm a little disappointed that Keiko was written to be so clueless. Like, it's part of the trope. It's part of how you have to write that. You have to have that character not totally aware, because the other characters have to figure it out for themselves. Mm-hmm. And I get it, again, that this is being played as a farce. But honestly, I feel like those moments were so ripe for more honest exploration. Should it be a book? Should it be a two-parter? I don't know. I don't know if we need to go that far. But there was an absolute realness to that contrivance that I thought really hit home, and really can hit home for anybody who saw it.
And it's something that they built up over time. Miles was invested in this surrogate motherhood that Kira has brought to their family. And now they have this extremely extended Irish family, now with Miles and with Keiko, and now with Kira and Molly, and then the newborn, that's coming. And I think that Miles has always been very, very protective and very involved with family life. I think that's very important to him. And he wants to make sure that that's well protected, that's well fostered, that's well developed, and it's very special. That I know this only extends, doesn't extend past his quarters, but everything that happens in his quarters, it's on his terms. It's his time, it's his family, and he'll do everything to make sure that that is a happy place for him to come home to. Mm-hmm. That being said, I think that in many ways, when they agreed to have Kira come and stay with them, sure, it was a good idea at the time, because they wanted to make sure that the baby's okay, and that for whatever need that Kira had, they would provide. But then you start seeing these things happen where he's massaging her legs, he's checking out her rashes for whatever reason, because they're there.
Right.
And even Keiko's like encouraging him to give Kira his famous massage. They're talking about all these different interests that they share with travel and the fondness and the yearning for being in these places. And you're right, John. It's like when that happens, there is just a human dynamic that kind of cries out for connection. And that connection is organic. It's not ill-meant. It's very, comes from a very honest place.
Yeah.
And I think that in many ways, I think that there's a warmth to Kira that she's sharing with the chief that she's never seen before, or he's never seen before in her. It's usually, Major Kira, always on duty, always with her guard up. And now she's very vulnerable. She's very fragile in this situation that she's in. And Miles wants to protect her in every way possible, both physically and emotionally. And I think that that's something that Keiko at times doesn't afford him. So once he makes that warm connection with somebody, he kind of goes forward with it in a way he doesn't expect. And that's interesting about relationships. Like sometimes you're just like, oh, there's that moment where it's kind of like go or no go.
Yeah.
And if you go, things will definitely change. And especially with people that you work with. And especially with someone who's your superior officer.
Yeah. Well, and let's be honest here. The way that the Miles and Keiko relationship has been written so far, mostly pretty terrible. I mean, they fall back on just a lot of tropes, a lot of easy ways out. But here you have this strong character in Kira, and it seems, it's sort of a parallel between what the characters are doing on screen to what the writers are doing behind the scenes, which is saying, this is a more interesting path to follow. For now, may not be the right path to go down, but we have to acknowledge that this is a path we have to look into. And hopefully we do the right thing at the end of the day, which they did. Let's make that clear. They did do the right thing. But, I just felt like there was a real honesty to letting those characters find themselves in that situation, which was very refreshing in a show that otherwise was all played for laughs.
Yeah, and I think it's also well written, very human, very natural that, with people that have been in long-term relationships, and they're very loyal, and they are very, just trusting in well-established relationships. There are times, when people are just only human. And I know that's not an excuse. It's not an excuse for what the chief could have done. Yeah. But at the same time, though, it is a very natural thing to do when two people just connect in a moment. And they know sometimes that after that moment, it was the wrong thing to do. And if everyone's mature about it and can act rationally about it, then you can move forward with it. But there's also that opportunity that you start having that what could have been moment in your life.
Yeah.
Right? And then if by chance that the chief acted on his baser instincts, then he would have been like, okay, what is this going to do with the newborn? How's it going to affect the dynamic with our family, and especially Molly? If Keiko decides to go a certain way about, their relationship in not forgiving Miles for what he did. Yeah, I'm glad they kind of took it to a certain threshold, but didn't cross that line. Mm-hmm. And both adults identified how that would have turned out.
It's a good thing there was no time travel involved. The enchantment under the sea dance was already violent enough without any Klingons around.
Well, we have been looking for Parmak in all the wrong places for nigh this entire episode. We keep looking, clearly not looking in the right places. But here we are, we have arrived at the end of the show where we've got to wrap it up. It's our obligation to each other and to you. But hey, Norman, something we haven't done in a long time is to do a quick reference on the title of the show. Something we like to drop in every now and then. Look, sometimes they're really obvious, defiant, homecoming, they don't need a lot of explanation. But this title, Looking for Parmak in All the Wrong Places, I think most people will know the song Looking for Love in All the Wrong Places, first performed by Johnny Lee, released in 1980. I did not remember that song was partly a hit because it appeared on the soundtrack for Urban Cowboy, starring John Travolta at a time when he was absolutely on that rising star just a couple of years after Saturday Night Fever. So this song became a huge hit when that movie became a huge hit and the soundtrack that followed. Now, I'm not a big country music fan, but you might also remember a very famous cover version, which came out 3 years later in 1983 on the Buckwheat Sings album, of course, titled Wookampah. So yeah. That's the one that really stuck with me. Yeah,
I'm pretty sure I still have that in my collection. It's wrapped in cellophane. It has not been played since the first time I got it. So yeah,
good. Well,
a true classic.
And what with Buckwheat's tragic ending, if you got any of you have a signed copy out there, that thing is just even more valuable. So
I'm pretty sure the B-side on that was Unts Tice Fee Times a
Fee Times a Mayday, yeah, a classic,
right? Yeah.
A classic, yeah. Mm-hmm. So, hey, now that we've filled you all in on the story of Looking for Parmak, let's figure out what it all means in the end. But before we do that, how about whether or not the episode holds up? So, as a production, Norman, what do you think?
Well, production-wise, I actually quite liked it. I mean, there were a lot of interesting ideas that they put into this episode. I really liked kind of the CGI motion capture device that Worf used to string along Quark like a puppet. I mean, literally like a puppet. I thought that was actually really neat, although I still do think that Worf is kind of doing a dishonorable thing by not letting Quark meet his honorable demise. And that would have solved Worf's problem, really, don't you think?
Yeah, pretty much.
Think,
pretty much.
He's like, well, if you can't stand up to him, then you're going to have to find someone strong enough and willing enough who can. And I think that was kind of like Worf's whole point. Anyway, though, I mean, production aside, I already talked about, how the cast really started to gel for me in this episode, and how these quieter moments, these little bit more comedic episodes allow the characters to breathe and stretch a little bit. So there's not a lot of great deep meaning in this episode for me. I mean, I guess I could speculate that in the subtext of all these relationships, it kind of feels like, as we've mentioned before, these kind of 1980s high school John Hughes type of, Ferris Bueller's or, Breakfast Club, and I know this isn't a John Hughes movie, but one comes to mind that's very significant, 3 O'Clock High, because in this case, I guess it was the Klingon that fought Quark would have been Buddy Revell meeting Quark.
Ooh.
Oh, yeah.
I told you I auditioned for that movie, right?
Did you really?
I really did. I really, truly did. Yeah.
For all of the Patreon subscribers, you will get that story on our live recording.
Yes.
So think about subscribing. So, but it was kind of like we're going to meet, in the parking lot at 3 o'clock. Dun, dun, dun.
Yeah.
It was kind of had that feel. And obviously the Cyrano de Bergerac references were very strong in this episode. But, it's that kind of trope where, you have that one person who's right there in front of you, the girl next door, or, the misunderstood socialite that you had to mow a lot of lawns for to make sure that you could afford all the good things that she wants in life. And that's kind of like where Dax was in this. And I think that the one thing that I really liked about this story is she was always there. She was always the friend. She got friend zoned in this pretty hard. It's either like you're going to help me out with the girl, or you're going to be the girl that I really hope that someone else would be like.
Yeah.
But she's like, what about me? So she literally had to basically take the bull by the horns and fight for her man. And she fought for Worf at the end. And in the end, everything came out wonderfully bruised. So,
look, the friend zone sucks, but honestly, sometimes some great relationships come from the friend zone. You might start in the friend zone, but if you start with the friends and then something else happens, like you end up bruising each other, great.
or making off to Bajoran Irish cottage hideaway.
Yes, that too. There's something about this episode that I'm still trying to kind of sort out in my head. So I've always said that Star Trek is a pretty flexible format that allows a writer to explore different themes and styles, all under this general premise, this universe that is Star Trek. You can do adventure shows, you can do thoughtful, heady science fiction, you can do character drama, social, political stories, horror, and yes, even comedy. Now, what I don't totally understand is how it seems like DS9 has married itself to the sex farce as a style that needs to be revisited every so often. So, they're all in the writer's room. This is in my head. I imagine what happened behind the scenes in 1993. They're all in the writer's room. They're pitching things about the Dominion, Klingons, deep ethical dramas, and then someone raises their hand and says, I know I always bring up Twelfth Night or Kasi van Tute, but how about, just bear with me, how about this time we go to Edmond Rostand's 1897 hit Cyrano de Bergerac? What do you think? And, there's always one in the crowd who's the literature major. I know that guy was sometimes me, but regardless, it's a little weird here. I feel like introducing Lwaxana back on TNG was the attempt to tell that kind of story. And they did it a few times to varying degrees of success, but then those stories worked best when we really got to allow for some depth rather than just only playing it for laughs. So this episode is a little bit of a mixed bag. It's done very well for what it is. There is no question from me about that. I asked myself, was it the best way to get to where we are with the characters? I don't know. I don't know that I necessarily think it is, but that's not to say that all the character growth has to come from something darker or more tragic. I genuinely like the interplay between Dax and Worf, even if everything is made so obvious right from the start, right from the get-go, you know. Do I want to watch this episode again right away? Not necessarily, but I don't dislike it. I enjoyed it quite a bit. Am I glad it's there to help fill in, like you said, some of those gaps with the DS9 story overall? Absolutely. I like it when Star Trek tries to do something with relationships and even break a few molds along the way. This one, it went there. It definitely did. But it decided that everything had to be played for comedy. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. But when you do hit something that is a little more thoughtful and a little more relatable and serious, like the Miles and Kira thing, I feel like that deserved just a tiny bit more attention. And I feel like we won't get that later on. But I don't know. I'm here to be proven wrong. So overall, I think it does hold up. I think Andrew Robinson did a great job directing it. I think the fun stuff is really fun. Just maybe I need another minute to sit with this episode to figure out how it kind of fits DS9 for me. What about messages, morals, meanings?
I mentioned this before. This is a fun this is a fun comedic episode, and if anything, I think that you mentioned this in trivia, and I agree that it helped further along Dax's and Worf's relationship, and seeing it kind of happen for the most part and come to fruition in this episode, and seeing it kind of hinted at before in season 4, you're seeing something special kind of come to life here in this episode between the two of them. And I think that it's because Terry Farrell's Dax just brings this kind of earnestness to her feelings for Worf in a way where you see her just think, hey, I'm, to coin a phrase from Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, hey, I'm right here. I'm right in front of you.
Right.
Right. And if you're not smart enough to see it, it's not that she's going to say, forget you. She's like, I'm going to make you see it.
Yeah.
And I like the fact that she just kind of takes charge and said, I like you. I'm pretty sure you like me. Let's see where this goes. And if I have to appeal to your baser Klingon nature, I will, because I know how. Especially with the ritual between the romantic ritual with Kalis and
Lucara.
Lucara.
Yeah.
At the end.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a big and obviously ceremonial fight that establishes how people feel. It's like a Klingon courting ritual in a way.
Yeah.
So I like that she didn't give up, but she also didn't play the wallflower and kind of sulk and oh, woe is me. Worf is going after his own kind because I'm not good enough, or I'm not strong enough, or I'm not Klingon enough for him.
Yeah.
And she doesn't take that as the answer. She doesn't take that no for an answer. So I can see where this is going, and I hope that it's not done or overdone too many times in subsequent episodes, because I want to see it earn itself. I want to see this relationship grow organically and not get too boxed into something that's obviously trope-ish in these types of stories. And I want to see kind of like with Mulder and Scully, I want to see those moments where they come together and kind of explore, are we doing the right thing? Where's this going to go?
Yeah.
How are we going to work with each other on the station? Are we the same rank? Do I call you sir? Do I call you sir? Things of that nature, and kind of like who gets the one up on them when it comes to pulling rank.
Yeah. Look, there's something I really admire. Well, first of all, to be serious about it, again, the Miles and Kira relationship, such as it is, it was interesting to see something that is a realistic possibility played out where you have two adults addressing it and then deciding we have to do the right thing here. That is that plot line in a nutshell. But then the other thing is Dax, and you alluded to this, which is she's just putting herself out there saying, hey, I'm here. Here's the situation. This can happen if you were down with that, you know? And that's really all it takes for her. Had the answer from Worf been an emphatic no, then she probably just would have walked away and said, okay, well, you know, you don't know what you're missing. See ya. Mm-hmm. But she brings a lot to the table, and she can fight. Look, since this episode is based around a song parody, I'm going to throw in some of my own songs for this playlist that we're building here. First of all, because you brought it up, I'm Gonna Make You Love Me, which is a joint number by the Supremes and the Temptations. Great, great song. I think that one fits here when we're talking about the Dax storyline. So that one applies to Quark and Grilka just as it does apply to Dax and Worf. Here's another one for Dax and Worf. Love the One You're With, Stephen Stills.
Solid.
Yeah, I think that one works.
Yeah.
I think that. And then if you go for the Miles and Kira storyline, Tempted by the Squeeze. Great song. So
for Stephen Stills, it'd be like, instead of if you can't fight with the one you love, fight the one you're with.
Fight the one you're with.
Yeah.
Even better. All right, so everybody, you can put that in your various playlists. That'll be the official playlist for this episode.
Mission Log is produced by Roddenberry Entertainment. Executive producer, Rod Roddenberry. Our website and your opportunity to comment and connect with us is missionlogpodcast.com. If you would like to support Mission Log directly, you can do so at patreon.com/missionlog. Enjoy all the great Roddenberry podcasts at podcast.roddenberry.com, where you'll find Women at Warp, Priority 1, The Trek Files, your daily Star Trek news, and Shabam.
Shabam!
And for more Star Trek news and discussion, be sure to visit trekmovie.com.
On the next Mission Log, nor the battle to the strong.
Some of the music for Mission Log provided by Warp 11, online at warp11.com. Throwdown time. Who does Cyrano better? DS9's crew or Beverly Crusher's Enterprise Dinner Theater? End transmission.
Podcast.roddenberry.com, the Roddenberry Podcast Network.